Hi, my name is Angelina Celestin. My candidate number is 5016. My center number is UX416, and today I will be showing you my critical reflection. The first question asks me, how does your media product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? In my cover, my main image is of a flower in contrasting lighting. I made sure to feature this image because it represented moody photography, of which was my leading article. I made sure to utilize the rule of thirds and put the flowers to the side of the shot because in other photography magazines, their subject/focal point is also to the side. Also, what I noticed about photography magazines was that the colors are usually either bright, contrasting, or dramatic, and these three elements typically capture the attention of consumers. And I know since it would also get my attention, and so I made sure to set my subject in a rather dark setting with a contrasting bright light hitting the flowers and edited additional contrast into the image for emphasis. Typically, the main image is bright, contrasting, or dramatic, or a mix of them, as I said earlier, and so I focused more on the contrasting and brightness of things to ensure that it would grab my reader's attention when looking through magazines in a store. I titled my magazine Vision because it's a word associated with the idea of photography, as I've seen with other magazine mastheads like Photo News, Outdoor Photographer, and another one titled just as Photo. I wanted a font that was bold, sans serif, and I made sure the color of the masthead matched the color that stood out the most on my main image, as this theme can be seen in other photography magazines. At first, I planned on putting my masthead at the bottom of the cover, but knowing my readers typically read from up to down since I'm based in the US, it was more logical for me to put my masthead on the top, as well as since other photography magazines have their mastheads at the top as well. I also made sure to add a little description about the topic of the leading article. My leading article is titled Master Moody Photos because the purpose of this story is to teach my readers how to get started on moody photography in a way that doesn't come off as boring. By that, I mean providing techniques such as finding the perfect lighting and providing examples of the best editing strategies to use to achieve the desired product. I put my lead article on the bottom because I didn't want to deal with covering the focal point of my main image with the supporting cover lines, and also since other photography magazines seem to do the same. To distinguish my lead article from the supporting cover lines, I made it larger but not too large, and I made it bolder. Concerning the supporting cover lines themselves, I wanted to make sure the language wasn't too direct to the readers. For example, instead of saying how you can improve your silhouette shots, I will start off indirect and say striking silhouette shots, followed by and how you can improve in parentheses. And of course, I added these stories since a lot of other photography magazines, such as Outdoor Photographer, doesn't use as much supporting cover lines. I added a barcode to show that my magazine is up for purchase. I used a dull bright yellow color in agreement with the yellow lighting on the main image as the theme of my cover, since this also happens in other photography magazines where, again, the color that stands out the most in the main image is going to be used for other little features on the cover, like the flash puff and masthead. I placed my dateline right under the masthead in relation to other datelines that I've seen, and I placed one extra piece of the dateline, the actual date itself, above the masthead just for aesthetic purposes. I made the size of the dateline the smallest because while it's important for a magazine, it's the least most important thing I want my reader to see on my cover. I wanted to use a flash puff in my cover since a lot of other magazines did the same, and usually these flash puffs had content concerning camera gear, so I made mine about the same thing, adding a picture of a camera to show the gear that I wanted to showcase. Lastly, I added a border around my cover for aesthetic purposes and similarity to another magazine that I've referenced. In the design of the table of contents of a photography magazine, the main element is the collage of photos in them, so I added a couple photographs and made a mini collage, making sure to enlarge one of the photographs to show that it was the cover story, including the page number and the name of the story to which the photo belonged to. The reason why I didn't add so much photos was because not only did I want my own minimalistic feel, but it would also create issues with formatting because adding more photos would, for me, mean making some of the images small, and I didn't want them to be too small. Some of the stories listed in the contents also came with a photo to represent it, so I took a photo of something to represent the story to which it belonged to and added a little tag to reference the page number it belonged to alongside with its title, just like what I did for the cover story. I made my review section a separate box to copy one of the magazines I've seen, although it wasn't necessary since other photography magazines didn't feature the same thing. This section, being mainly for camera gear, I took a picture of a camera and, with the help of my teacher, got a picture of one of his cameras to later cut them out and place them into the review section. Also, regarding stories, I added a brief description as it was another convention among photography magazines. And for the contents, they're all organized by the titles above them, like techniques. Although the average number of photos in these magazines are around 8, I decided to get 6 photographs because I didn't want to end up making any of my photos smaller than they already were. I used a different font for the contents and another font for the word content itself, and I made sure that these two fonts were very similar with each other to avoid the reader from being confused with the theme of my magazine. Concerning color and design, there was no specific theme to go by, since photography magazines usually don't have a theme for their content unless it's for something special like a black and white edition magazine. My magazine has a total of about 100 to 110 pages, and I include a range of numbers instead of a definite amount because a lot of the pages would consist of advertisements, as that is usual in the typical photography magazine, but I'm not sure on exactly how many advertisements I will want in my particular magazine. An extra element that I added was the border around each page of the table of contents to flow with the cover design. This is my introductory spread, or opening spread. This is basically where you give an introduction to the double page story, which is common to see in photography magazines. The focal point of each photograph is placed to the opposite side of the spread while the text is on the other. So I applied that to my own magazine. There's also usually a little series logo on top of the introduction, like snapshots and photo skills, so I made mine called the Photo Encyclopedia. I added a title, a subheading for the following story, and then added the actual introduction, and this is the structure of this introductory / opening double page spread. I put a caption on the side to add a little more to the story by commenting on the picture that I used for this spread and added a credit on the top right corner to recognize who took the photo, in this case, me. I did not add a folio to this spread because the folio isn't usually found on these spreads. For my double page spread story, I made it a quick and easy to understand tutorial on how to get started on moody photography, talking about the best things to take pictures of, the best way to take those pictures with your camera, and the best way to edit your photos for a satisfactory product. This tutorial reflects off the many other tutorials that appear in other photography magazines. I made sure to imitate the language of a photographer by including essential terms such as desaturate and composition. Concerning my design, I added the series logo on the top left corner to reflect the format of another double page spread that I've seen. With the collage of images in tutorial-based stories, I added a collage of my own, kind of, and although I could have added more photos explaining the process of taking these kinds of photos, I was limited in technology, so I simply added the pictures of the final product. And to fill in the space of the shortness of my story, I added a box explaining how a camera mentioned in my table of contents can be used to achieve this style in photography, making sure to also add the website to whom the camera belongs to, in this case, the website of the Kodak company. I also added captions for the pictures, labeling them by 1, 2, and 3. Each caption describes the relevance the photo has to do with the topic to provide a benefit to my readers, and the fact that they each describe an element within their photo and how it relates to moody photography. With aesthetics, I followed up with the yellowish theme. Because the photo of the flower is in my cover, I decided to make a different photo of the flower, the biggest photo, on my spread. I put the text in the column format because it would be seen as unprofessional if I did otherwise. Even other magazines that aren't photography magazines contain their text in the column format, and so it would show that my magazine is more on the indie, independent side, but not on the firm and professional side. That sticks to conventions, yet holds on to its unique identity in the genre. I also added a folio here since this is where it continues after the introductory spread. The next part of my question asks, how does my magazine represent social groups or issues? And this is where things get a little limited but ends on a positive note. In my magazine, my table of contents featured a section where there was an interview with me, as well as a section where I would help teach my audience how to imitate a professional-looking self-portrait. The thing I want to tackle here is the lack of recognition for Black and female photographers. Photography magazines don't generally talk about social issues directly, as they are more focused on bringing up information out to the world about how photography works, It's a technical thing, not a political one most of the time. And during my research, I usually saw diverse models, but not really diverse photographers. But as I looked more into it, I saw that there is actually a greater recognition for the need of learning more about black photographers and how great of a contribution they bring to the table of the genre. And the same goes for female photographers. So, all in all, there is a growing diversity in the genre.